sitting there having a great time at a club, and then you hear what sounds like fireworks or balloons popping. And then you hear people start screaming and
out! Everybody out! Everybody out! Everybody out!
People start falling. You realize it's not a show anymore.
Police in Orlando, Florida are dealing with a shooting at a nightclub with multiple injuries.
I had massive trauma victims coming in, but I had no idea what to expect.
They said there's a lot of dead bodies in the club. They can't identify anybody.
The individual believed to be responsible for the terror attack at the Orlando Club Pulse early Sunday morning has been identified as Omar Mir Sadiq Martin.
There was an allegiance to the Islamic State.
This was an act of terror and an act of hate.
Hate, as well as a desire to sow terror.
This could have happened anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, today was Orlando's turn.
But this is a sobering reminder that attacks on any American is an attack on all of us.
And we welcome you to a special edition of The Hardline. Tonight, I'm John Bachman in for Ed Berliner. It has been less than 48 hours since a coward inspired by online jihadi culture and a warped sense of reality walked into Orlando's Pulse nightclub and opened fire, killing 49 people. First, we acknowledge the loss of life and we pray for the victims and their families. Now let's try to make some sense of all of this. We start with the former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division, Ron Hosko. He's joined by co-founder of Life After Hate and author of Romantic Violence, Memoirs of an American Skinhead, Christian Picciolini. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us today.
Good to be with you, John.
Thank you, John.
All right, Ron, I want to start with this aspect. So many people out there have been asking this question. If the FBI investigated this guy twice, how come they were not able to prevent this attack? Here is FBI Director James Comey telling us about what the FBI knew about Omar Martin, and it seems like they knew quite a lot. Take a listen.
We first became aware of him in May of 2013. He was working as a contract security guard at a local courthouse. First, he claimed family connections to Al-Qaeda. He also said that he was a member of Hezbollah. He said he hoped that law enforcement would raid his apartment and assault his wife and child so that he could martyr himself. One witness told us, when asked, do you know anybody else who might be radicalizing, that he had once been concerned about the killer. We're also going to look hard at our own work to see whether there is something we should have done differently. So far, the honest answer is, I don't think so.
Well, Ron, I appreciate the candor from James Comey, but that answer is just not acceptable to a lot of people out there.
No, that's a hard answer to process in light of the carnage in Orlando, the tragedy down there. But we have to remember that the FBI is constrained by Attorney General guidelines. You can find those guidelines online. The FBI takes those guidelines very seriously, and their goal in one of these investigations is to get to the truth. And if the truth at that time tells them that this person is not a national security threat, is not in the act of committing a federal crime against our country or against one of our people, their obligation is to close that case within a certain time frame. And so you have to remember that it's when they do that case, when that decision is made, it's made by human beings who are fallible, but it's also a snapshot in time, John. Mm-hmm. And that snapshot may tell you what I'm thinking and capable of today, and then I change tomorrow because we're human beings.
Well, Christian, I wanted to ask you this question. We want to also acknowledge that this is the one-year anniversary of the Charleston shooting. Obviously, two different cases here, but folks have tied them together in this case. But I wanted to ask you this because you specialize in this issue of hate. Is there a difference, in your opinion, from the type of hate that inspired that crime in Charleston and what we saw in Orlando?
John, I really don't think that there is. I mean, I think that extremism exists in all different types, and whether it's white nationalist extremism or sovereign citizen extremism or Islamist extremism, hate is hate, and we have to start treating all of these cases as if they were terrorism. instead of hate crimes, because I really believe that the fight won't get the proper resources and it won't get the proper attention until we actually call it what it is, and that's terrorism.
And this is, I guess, some of the strongest language, Ron, that we've heard from President Obama. Obviously there are others like Donald Trump calling him out for not using these terms like radical Islamic terrorism. Do you think the words matter in this case?
I don't. I think actions matter. And there are things, and certainly that I believe personally that this president can be doing. He can ratchet up his rhetoric like he does in so many other areas of his presidency. He ratchets up the rhetoric, and it feels like he doesn't move the ball forward. That's true when dealing with the Chinese, with dealing with North Korea, with dealing with Iran. We hear this rhetoric, and we don't see the action behind it. We don't see the drive to fix a problem. This problem's going to be with us for a while, this ISIS problem. Hate, of course, infects so many people, and it defines some people. Other people know how to keep it in control.
Well, Christian, I want to go back to something you said about how all this is under the umbrella of terrorism when you classify it. But one of the issues and one of the reasons why, particularly this administration and so many have had a hard time understanding the threat of ISIS is they do not understand the level to which they are, and those who adhere to the ISIS ideology are willing to take that hate. It's completely different even than any other terror group we've seen before than Al-Qaeda.
Absolutely, there are people out there that want to do us harm. But I have to disagree with Ron a little bit on his point. I don't think it's government's responsibility to try and off-ramp people from an ideology. It's certainly their responsibility to protect us and to keep us safe from terrorism. And I think that they're doing that to a degree.
But Christian, I think Ron's point, and he's been inside the FBI. He knows this. You can, let's say we were just able to wave a wand and wipe ISIS off of the face of the earth. There is going to be a new organization that's going to fill that void that's left by ISIS. And when he talks about you do have to win hearts and minds, you have to provide something as an alternative, and that preferably would be a secular government in the Middle East like we have in Israel.
No, but that's exactly my point, John, is I think that this has to be a community-led approach with the support of the government. I think the community are the bystanders that first see the warning signs of these things happening. And, it's people like me, people who were formerly part of an ideology, who can work with these people who understand the motivations to intervene and to off-ramp them at a critical stage when they're at risk, not after the fact when they've committed something.
Now, Ron, when you read these interviews with former ISIS members who have left to come back, whether it's to Europe or to the United States, they talk about the disconnect between what they were promised and what the reality of the situation is in Syria or in Iraq or wherever they chose to join ISIS. How important is it that that information gets out to the public? Because clearly, if you look at San Bernardino and you look at the case here in Orlando, we are losing the propaganda war online with ISIS.
Yeah, it sure seems as though we are, John, and I think it is critical to get those messages out to a public, particularly in some disaffected folks and some lost souls who desperately need the truth to come their way because they hang on to these false hopes of what ISIS promises, and ultimately what they promise is a siren song. They promise your death, your martyrdom, presumably for their greater cause. They're going to claim it as a victory when you die for their purpose, whether that's here in America or overseas. And our public, disaffected people in America have to hear that message.
Well, Ronnie, you alluded to this before. There are constraints under which the FBI has to work. And part of that constraint system is the Constitution itself. I've heard this many times today that under the current system, the way things are organized, considering the fact that this guy bought this gun and his guns legally, do you expect any kind of change to come from Washington, D.C., any kind of legislative change that would prevent this from happening in the future?
Yeah, I don't expect near-term change. It seems like our government in Washington, D.C. is such a damaged institution right now, lacks so much trust of the public. I think the support rate for Congress is like 17%. They don't seem to be able to get anything done. I hope this Congress and this president can somehow come together and move the needle in some way. But I also hope that my rights as a gun owner, lawful gun owner, sportsman, target shooter, are protected in this conversation as well. If we take my gun, the criminals aren't worried about those laws. There are ways to prosecute those people more vigorously, and you don't have to read the paper for too long to see the lack of prosecution of felons in possession across the country and chiefs claiming pain as a result of it in their cities.
It's certainly a legitimate concern to have, Christian. I don't know where you come down on this issue. There are real concerns I have about infringing on our constitutional rights, one of those being the Second Amendment right we have to keep and bear arms. Go ahead, weigh in on this. What do you think? Do you feel like there is going to be any kind of change, if not gun control? But there are three boxes here that concern me, and we'll talk about this with the Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw coming up here. But this guy had a history of domestic violence, okay? That unto itself is a separate issue. But when you combine that with the fact that there is known communication perhaps going on between this guy and ISIS, and also that he was investigated 2 times by the FBI, there should be some way where we could check those 3 boxes off and say, this gentleman needs to go into a separate stack for closer inspection. Christian, what do you think?
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely correct. I mean, he showed all the classic warning signs of somebody who was becoming radicalized and engaged with a group looking to do harm. And, I think that was brought to the attention of the FBI. But, Ron's correct. If the FBI doesn't have anything to go on, they have to follow the letter of the law and they have to let him go and process, expeditiously. As far, I'm pro-gun. I support the Second Amendment. I don't think that any president in my memory has ever said that they wanted to take away guns from legally abiding citizens who want to hunt or who want to protect themselves. But we definitely have a problem with guns. We have illegal guns that are being carted across state lines. We have illegal guns that are going across borders to foreign territories. And, the fact remains is we have over 360 million guns in this country, and events like this keep happening. So, I'm for gun control reform, but I do support the Second Amendment. I do believe we have the right to protect ourselves.
Yeah, right now it's kind of a zero-sum game. Either you're for the Second Amendment or not, or at least that's the way both sides like to frame the argument. And I think it's a danger. We're in a dangerous place right now, and we just boil it down to those 2 choices. Ron, we got to run. We're out of time. Unfortunately, it was great to see you again. And Christian, it was nice to meet you and talk to you for the first time. I appreciate your insight and your candor, gentlemen. Great to have you with us here. All right, coming up, much more to come. We're going to continue to talk about the shooting in Orlando. What does it mean for the political conversation? I'm sure you've heard both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton speak about this today, as well as President Obama. We'll have those for you coming up here very shortly. Also, Pete Hoekstra, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, will be back with us as well. More to come here on Hardline. Stick around.